This is part B of chapter 23. This is the second part of the digestive system. We're going to start by looking at the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. All of these are accessory organs to the digestive system. The liver is one of the main things it's going to be doing is producing bile. Bile is something that's going to help with the breakdown of fats. The gallbladder is going to be a storage facility essentially for the bile, and then the pancreas. The pancreas is going to be supplying several different enzymes that are needed for digestion, and it's also going to be releasing bicarbonate, which helps to neutralize that stomach acid. This picture is showing a view of the liver, as well as on the bottom the gallbladder, which is behind the liver. Excuse me, and this is from another viewpoint of the liver where you can see the gallbladder. You can also see the different lobes of the liver. The hepatic artery and vein are going to enter the liver at the porta hepatis. The bile duct, this is going to contain the common hepatic duct, leaves the liver. The bile is actually produced in the liver itself. The cystic duct connects to the gallbladder, and then the bile duct has both the common hepatic duct and the cystic duct, where they join together and then form that bile duct, which is then going to empty into the small intestines. So in this picture in green, you can see the gallbladder, you can see the cystic duct, you can see the bile duct, and then you can also see the hepatic portal veins, the hepatic artery, as it's feeding and servicing the liver itself. If you look at the microscopic anatomy of the liver has different lobules. It's composed of different what we call hepatocytes or liver cells, whose purpose is to filter and process that nutrient-rich blood. This is a picture of what it looks like microscopically. As you can see, they look like little hexagons. And if you look at one close up even further, you can see in the middle there is a central vein. There are what we call liver sinusoids, which basically are capillaries that are leaking there between those hepatic plates. And then there's also a huge concentration of macrophages that are going to be found in the liver sinusoids. Its purpose is to remove any type of extra debris, remove old red blood cells. Keep in mind that the liver's function is to be filtering out the blood that has just been gone through the intestines and it has absorbed all of those nutrients from what was eaten. So it's very high in nutrient content, but you need to process those nutrients. You need to filter out any toxins, any extra debris, and you want to make sure there's no microorganisms that could be pathogenic that may have been also absorbed in the process. So before that blood gets disseminated throughout the rest of the body, it's going to go to the liver first for this filtration process. So on this cross section, you can see once again very strong blood supply to the liver. You do have those macrophages that are located there to help remove any of the debris, like say they'll remove red blood cells as well. The hepatocytes are also going to be producing bile. As I said, the bile is actually produced in the liver. A lot of people think bile is produced in the gallbladder. It is not made in the gallbladder. It is stored in the gallbladder. So the hepatocytes are producing bile. They are also processing all of those nutrients. So you have a lot of, say, glucose coming in. It's going to convert it to glycogen, which is a storage form of glucose. It's storing vitamins, and once again, it's detoxifying any toxins that may have also been absorbed. Bile is kind of yellowish green, more alkaline solution, meaning it's above pH 7. It does contain bilirubin. Bacteria will break that bilirubin down in the intestines. You need to have the bile to help, as I said, ultimately help break down fats and lipids. Sometimes the liver is not functioning properly. If it's inflamed, it's referred to as hepatitis. What can cause this inflammation? Oftentimes it's caused by a viral infection. It can be also caused by certain exposures to toxins, be that drug, be it natural, such as from mushrooms or other poisonous materials. Cirrhosis is when it is a chronic or long-term inflammation of the liver. This can be caused by certain drugs, can be caused by excessive long-term intake of alcohol, and it causes a higher blood pressure within the liver itself, and ultimately it can cause this progressive damage to the liver that is irreversible. Excuse me. In severe cases with cirrhosis, what they can do is a liver transplant. However, livers for transplanting are fairly scarce. One thing about the liver that they have found, though, is that because the liver has multiple lobes, on the previous pictures you may have noticed that the right side of the liver is much larger than the left lobe. And they have discovered for liver transplant several years ago that if you have a situation where somebody has put that they are an organ donor and the liver is able to be transplanted, then on the recipients, what they can do is not transplant the entire liver. They can just take one of the lobes. Typically for adults, what they will do is they will use the right couple of lobes on the liver because it's larger, implant that into one recipient. They can take the left lobe because it is smaller, put that into a child, and the liver will regenerate over time to its full size. That has been hugely successful and was huge steps in the whole organ transplant field, because especially for a child that needs a liver transplant, an adult liver is too large to put in a child. So therefore, if you only take that left lobe, put that in a child, it's small enough it will fit and it will grow in size as that child grows into adulthood. So that has been fairly successful. The gallbladder is tucked underneath the liver. As I said, it's going to store that bile, it concentrates it until it is needed. When it is needed, it will go into contractions and release the bile. And as I said, it will go through the bile duct to the small intestines. Gallstones, that's when there's too much cholesterol or too few bile salts, and the bile cannot flow. It's obstructed, it's blocked from flowing from the gallbladder into the small intestines. And you're going to know this, it's going to be very painful. How do we treat it? There's several different ways. There are some drugs that can help to dissolve it, ultrasound vibrations, or they may have to do surgery. It depends on the individual's case. The pancreas has several different functions. It does produce pancreatic juice. This is going to help, contains enzymes that will help with further digestion of the nutrients that have been taken in. Digestion will occur in the small intestines because the pancreatic juice is going to be produced, and then from the pancreas it will flow to the small intestines. The pancreas, if you remember from the endocrine system chapter, also does have some function. It's one of those organs that has multiple functions and multiple systems. It does secrete insulin and glucagon. And this is a picture just showing the structure of some of the tissue of the pancreas that is producing several different enzymes that are needed for digestion. So the pancreatic juice, like I said, it's going to help neutralize that acid That chyme coming from the stomach was about pH 2, so it needs to be neutralized so it does not damage the small intestines. So the pancreatic juice is slightly alkaline, so it's going to help to neutralize that acidity of the chyme. It does contain electrolytes. It also contains digestive enzymes. Some of these will be essential for breaking down proteins, others for carbohydrates, others for lipids, and some for nucleic acids. So this is showing once again the orientation of the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. And you can see how the bile duct as well as the duct from the pancreatic duct, how they all feed into the small intestines. In terms of regulation of these secretions of the bile and the pancreatic juice, it's going to be stimulated by both the nervous system and hormones. When there are food is entering into the small intestines, that's going to help to stimulate the gallbladder to release the bile. So therefore, if the small intestine is empty, it is not releasing bile unnecessarily. This just shows the steps of the secretion of both the pancreatic juices and the bile. The small intestines is where most of the digestion and most of the absorption is going to occur. It is rather long, anywhere from 7 to 13 feet. The diameter of it is a little over an inch. So that's why it's called small intestines, is not due to the length, but due to the diameter. It is divided into 3 components. The first part, which would be attached to the stomach, is the duodenum. Then the middle portion is the jejunum, and then the ileum is the final section that is then connected to the large intestine. So in this picture, you can see how it is coiled around and is embedded, or basically surrounded by the large intestines. There are certain characteristics or features on the small intestines that help to increase the efficiency of absorption, and some of that has to do with folds. You have circular folds, villi, and microvilli. So the circular folds, these are permanent folds, so they're always there, and what happens, instead of the chyme just moving straight through, it kind of mixes, swirls around. That is allowing more time. It's slowing it down to allow for more absorption, because the longer it's there, the more you're able to absorb. From the folds, you do have these projections known as villi, and then on the villi are even smaller projections, which are known as the microvilli. And this is where a lot of the final absorption is going to occur. So in this picture, you can see a cross-section of the small intestines with the muscles that are going to be contracting to help move the chyme along. And then in the circular folds, as you can see there, that's what's going to be slowing up the chyme as it's moving through, so it's not just a smooth surface and rushes past. And then on the folds, you have the villi, and then this is an enlarged picture of a cell with the microvilli on it, where you're going to have goblet cells that are producing mucus, which are helping to aid the movement of the chyme through, plus also having the absorption and digestion occurring. So there's different types of cells that are found on the villi. You've got things such as the goblet cells that are going to be producing, as I said, some of the mucus. You have additional cells that are helping to with absorption, and cells that are also helping to produce chemicals such as lysozyme and defensin that would destroy any bacteria that may have survived through the stomach to prevent an infection. And then you have stem cells. The epithelial layer is renewed about every 2 to 4 days on the small intestines. You also do have some of your malt cells here in the mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues The Peyer's patches, they are found throughout the small intestines. Why? Because you might have increased numbers of bacteria there, and so they're going to be helping to recognize those uh, foreign pathogens and initiate the attack against them so that they cannot penetrate the wall of the small intestines and then penetrate and infect you. From a clinical aspect, one thing that chemotherapy does is that it will target cells that are rapidly going through mitosis. So you're trying to target your cancer cells because those are typically going through very rapid mitosis. The drawback of chemotherapy is that, as I just said, the stem cells in the small intestines are also going through mitosis very rapidly. If they're renewing every 2 to 4 days, that means the mitotic rate is very high. So, unfortunately, the chemotherapy agents do not distinguish between cancer cells and, say, the stem cells of your small intestines. So they would also be having a negative effect on those cells. And that's why oftentimes patients who are going through chemotherapy, because this medication, this therapy is affecting the cells of the small intestines, those stem cells, they're also going to have symptoms ultimately of nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea because of the effect of the chemotherapy agents on those stem cells of the small intestines. The intestinal juices are secreted in response to swelling, stretching, or distension of the mucosa. Also, they are going to be triggered or stimulated by the acidic chyme that is moving through. And so mucus is going to be secreted. That's going to help with neutralizing the acidity. The chyme from the stomach does contain partially digested carbohydrates and proteins and fats that have not been digested. It's going to take anywhere from 3 to 6 hours in the small intestines for the nutrients to be absorbed and for most of the water to be absorbed. How are things moving through the small intestines? Segmentation is the process that's going to be moving it through along with peristalsis. This is going to be controlled by pacemaker cells. From a neural standpoint, parasympathetic division is going to increase the motility. Sympathetic division will decrease it. And this is showing the peristalsis and the segmentation, how you're slowly moving that chyme through the small intestines. The ileocecal sphincter is the valve between the small intestines and the large intestines, and that's when it relaxes and opens, that is what is going to allow the chyme to move now from the small intestines into that large intestines. So at this point, this table is showing the organs in the function. So we've already been through the mouth, through the pharynx and esophagus, to the stomach, to the small intestines, and now we're finally in the large intestines. The large intestines has different features that are unique to it. It has some longitudinal smooth muscles. There's 3 bands of it known as tennicoli. The haustra, which look like sacs, are held in that position because of the attachment of the tennicoli. And then you do have these little pouches of fat that extend off of that, known as epiploidic appendages. And so you can see these on this diagram. You can also see on this diagram the ileocecal valve as the chyme moves from the small intestines into the large intestines. The large intestines is divided into different segments or parts. The cecum is the large area that first receives the chyme. Then it's going to move up the ascending colon around the right colic flexure, also known as the hepatic flexure. That's the turn, as it then moves through the transverse colon. On the left side, there's another turn known as the left colic flexure, also known as the splenic flexure. Then it will move down the descending colon, through the sigmoid colon, then into the rectum, and then finally out the anal canal. This is showing at the anus and anal canal that there is both the external anal sphincter and internal anal sphincter. You do have some voluntary control over the opening of this to allow defecation to occur. And this is a picture showing of a cadaver of basically your abdominal pelvic area. You can see the liver. Usually that's one thing that surprises people as to how large the liver is. They're usually not expecting that. You can see a little tiny green spot of the gallbladder peeking out. The spleen is way over on the side. Kind of the stomach, you can see the greater omentum. That is that layer. It looks fatty. That's helping to protect, and you have blood vessels and nerves running through it. It is a double layer connective tissue. And then underneath you can see the small intestines, and then you can see part of the cecum there. Once again, here is a drawing showing the mesenteries. The greater omentum, or the lesser omentum is seen here. The greater omentum has been removed. It would be lying on top, as you can see here. And then this is a side view, get the orientation of where, like the lesser omentum, greater omentum, and where the various mesenteries and peritoneums are relative to the organs. From some clinical aspects or imbalances, appendicitis, excuse me, this is when you have inflammation of that appendix. The appendix is essentially what we call a vestigial organ. It's left over. It doesn't really have a purpose. However, if it does get inflamed, why does it get inflamed? Oftentimes there's infectious bacteria there. It may be blocked by fecal material and allows those infectious bacteria to be trapped there. It can swell, be very painful, and it needs to be removed. You do not want it to rupture, because if it ruptured, then you will end up with peritonitis. Basically, you have an infection in the abdominal pelvic area, and that needs to be treated immediately. If not, it can lead to death. The large intestines, from a microscopic standpoint, is made up of simple columnar-epithelial cells. Later it becomes stratified squamous so that it can withstand a lot of the abrasions. It does not have those circular folds or the villi that you saw in the small intestines. It does have a lot of goblet cells. The large intestines has a very high concentration of bacteria. They're supposed to be there. They've been able to try to estimate the numbers, total numbers, as well as the different types of species, and it has been estimated there are over 1,000 different species of bacteria in the large intestines. They are necessary. These are the good guys. It's part of the normal microbiota that is present there, the normal bacteria. They help to digest some of the food items that were not digested in the small intestines. They can carry out fermentation of some of the carbohydrates, some of the sugars. The only drawback from that is that they can produce some acids, which can be irritating. They also can produce some gases from the fermentation, which can also be uncomfortable or irritating to you. They are responsible, these bacteria, for synthesizing some of the B vitamins that are necessary for survival, as well as vitamin K. And vitamin K is necessary for part of the clotting factors. There's more and more research looking at what these bacteria are and how does that balance affect you and your overall health. And there's more and more evidence showing that the overall bacteria, the number and the kinds that are in your large intestines can have effects on your weight. It can have effects on your susceptibility to different diseases and may even have effects on your mood. So they're looking at if an individual is having an issue with a particular disease or mood or weight, would it be possible to change those bacteria that are in your large intestines? And might that be a way of dealing with some of these issues? So that is something that healthcare is looking at. How long does material stay in the large intestines? Typically 12 to 24 hours, so it's there for a while. There's no typically further breakdown of the food other than what the bacteria are doing. As I said, some of the vitamins are being made here. You are absorbing some more water. There was water absorption occurring in the small intestines. It will continue in the large intestines. And the main purpose is to move that waste product through the large intestines to the anus so that you can release it. From a clinical standpoint, what is diarrhea? Diarrhea is when you have watery stools. Why? Because basically the chyme is moving too fast through the intestines, not allowing you to absorb enough of the water. Why would this be happening? Well, it can be a number of factors. Sometimes it has to do with the ingestion of other bacteria that will interfere with the process of absorption of water, sometimes blocking it. Sometimes it's moving it through, causing it to move through faster. So there can be multiple things that can cause the diarrhea. One thing you need to watch, though, is that the diarrhea lasts for a prolonged time. It can lead to dehydration. It can lead to an imbalance of your electrolytes. So you need to watch that and make sure that you are replenishing fluids. For certain diseases and illnesses that diarrhea is known to be a problem, it's basically replace fluids as quickly as you are losing it. Constipation is when the food remains in the colon for too long of a period and too much water is being reabsorbed, which then makes the feces very hard and difficult to pass. It's often caused by insufficient fiber in the diet, not enough fluid in the diet. Sometimes it's lack of exercise, so there can be multiple causes for it. Once again, you need to treat it.